Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Kami gives Naruto the God eyes, and she waits for Naruto to accept her love. Part 1, hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Up in the skies, Kami looked down on the village of Konoha with varying levels of disgust. It only intensified when she saw the latest hunt, the demon mob that were chasing after Naruto. She scowled as she watched them abuse the child. With a disgusted snort, she turned to paper that was lying off on her desk. On that paper were the names of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. It pained her heart to know two caring and pure souls sacrificed themselves for those whelps. It hurt even more when Kushina found out that her husband had sold his soul to the Shinigami for nothing, and that her baby boy was being tortured, and she couldn't do anything about it. Kami sighed as she continued to watch. That's it. I'm going to do something about this, she yelled as she flew down into the world below. Naruto was being trampled and bruised before the Anbu finally decided to show up, but when they did, the beating was already over. After the crowd had dispersed, the Anbu unit left the area, as if their only duty was to just make sure he didn't die. The blonde boy began curling himself up, and his eyes began welling up with tears, as he simply cried there, letting all his emotions out. Why, what did I do? He sobbed, as he picked himself up. You did nothing wrong, my child, he heard a feminine voice say. Naruto whipped his head to the noise in fear of another beating, but felt a blush crawling up into her face at what he saw. What stood there was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. It was a raven-haired beauty. She had long luscious hair that stopped at the small of her back, and her face was motherly and loving, but didn't lose any of her sexual and feminine qualities. She had curves that seemed to go forever, and long never-ending legs alongside perky and firm breasts. You don't need to even touch it to know how perfect they must feel, and Naruto was just a kid. He didn't even know what to even do with those. She was wearing the most dazzling red dress he had ever seen, with a golden dragon swirling around her midriff with the head resting on her shoulder. Kami looked at Naruto amused at his dazed expression, and giggled to herself. Now Naruto, what are you looking at? She asked, hands on her hip, and cocked to one side while raising an eyebrow. Naruto just shook his head of any thoughts that shouldn't be there, and fought furiously against the blush to look at the woman before him. Kami made her way to Naruto with elegance and grace only one of regal birth can achieve. Naruto, sweetie, do you know who I am? Kami asked, her voice warm and motherly. Naruto shook his head no, not at all trusting his voice to say anything. I am Kami. A lump formed in his throat. Kami, Naruto said, his voice high and in disbelief. Kami just nodded her head and looked into his eyes with shame and sadness. Naruto, I want you to know that Konoha's end is nigh. For years I have looked upon this village with nothing but disgust, but held back because of your mother and your father, and also because of you. Even though they hurt you, you still love them and care for them. You are a pure soul. One that Konoha does not deserve, and because of this I will give you a power. A power? Naruto asked. This was far too much for him to take in. She nodded. Before she said anything else, she locked her lips to Naruto's, and the blonde felt the blood flowing into his mind. His brain was unable to comprehend it. It was filled with passions and warmth. It was amazing. When their lips parted, Naruto could feel his eyes changing, reforming. It wasn't painful nor was it comfortable, but Kami just smiled. You now carry the Omnigan with these eyes. You are God, you control chakra, and you will have an infinite amount. Your powers would be the same yet greater than the Rinnegan, Sharingan, and Byakugan. You will have all their benefits with none of their disadvantages. Also, every creature that I have made shall do you bidding, and when you reach your age, you will be husband. But I understand you can have many wives, but I must come first, Kami replied, making the boy blush. Ma, marriage? Naruto thought in his mind. Not only was he made a god, but now he was going to marry Kami. Kami giggled again. Be safe, and stay strong. Learn your power, and meet your tenant. Don't worry, Kurama isn't a bad guy once you get to know him. Kurama. Before he could get an answer, Kami put her hand onto his forehead before he was dragged to the recesses of his mind. 8 years later. Naruto, age 12. Who are you? Yelled a nin, as he jumped down, and stared into the eyes of a man rumored to be god in the ninja realm. He wore a white overcoat with orange flames on the hue and sleeves. On the back of his coat was the kanji for sage, while within his coat, he wore a standard flak jacket, but this one was black with a whirlpool symbol on the top left side of it. Underneath the jacket was a black long-sleeved shirt with orange lining, and a chainmail undershirt. He wore a pair of cargo pants that had scrolls going down vertically on his legs, with a pair of steel-toed combat boots. His face was overshadowed by a hood only revealing a small portion of his mouth, while the entirety of his upper face was pitch black, except for a single strand of blonde hair jutting out. But through the darkness one could still see this man's eyes, as they shone with a bright intensity like none other. His eyes were pure white, the epitome of indifference, as there were 6 black spiraling lines surrounding the center that held a tomo, a single large tomo, instead of a pupil where it lay, as the dominant one with 6 others that lay on each line. Before the man could ask any more questions, the center tomo began expanding out before taking the shape of a saw, and he began rushing through hand signs summoning jutsu. When his hand met the wood of the tree branch he was standing on, a giant purple snake appeared, and started cackling madly at the Kumonin. He froze, as he saw the snake's fangs open out, and he gave no resistance, as the snake devoured him whole. When his job was done the snake turned to his summoner, and asked, "Why did you call me to deal with just one person, my lord?" Nanda asked the shinobi, as they both stared into each other's eyes, one of indifference, and the other of respect. It wasn't the snake that had the indifferent look. He planned on betraying his comrades, and selling out his village. Not only that, but he stole slaves for his own profit. "Men like that make me sick. Knowing him in your stomach will help me sleep at night," the sage remarked, as the boss snake seemed to like the answer. Who was he to question a free meal? "Yes, Millard," the snake said, as he bowed his head before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Kurama, do we have anything else to do?" Naruto asked his longtime father figure. "Let's go on a killing spree. I hear Rock is a great place for one. I'm sure your father would agree." The fox remarked joyfully. "Calm your bloodless Kurama, don't worry, eventually a war will break out, and you and I will have to fight in it," said the shinobi. "Whatever Naruto." The now dubbed Naruto just grunted, and pulled his hood back, revealing his long spiky hair, and whisker marks with deep blue eyes. With closer inspection this man was nothing short of a young boy, and on his forehead was a hit I-8 with the kanji for Kyuubi on it with a whirlpool in the background. "Boy. Naruto, let's get back before Gaara gets pissed," yelled out a feminine voice. When Naruto whipped his head to look at her, he saw that it was a young petite girl with red hair tied into a ponytail, but ended off with a white tip, making it look like a foxtail. She wore a dark brown tank top that exposed her midriff, along with cargo pants that ended off with steel-toed boots. She also had amber-colored eyes. "Alright Hikari," Naruto yelled back, as he stood up. "I still don't know why you don't want to mate with her. She'd make a fine vixen." Kurama cried out. "I don't see Hikari like that. She's a little sister to me." Naruto yelled out. "Little sister? Little sister, what part about that chest of hers makes you think she is little?" The fox retorted, and it was true she had a pretty big cup size for her age. See, or something Naruto didn't pay much attention to when she was talking about them. "Well yeah, sometimes I wonder if you're even straight," Kurama said with a sigh. "Go back to sleep, you fuzzball." Naruto shook his head free of the mental link between him and the fox, before giving a salute to Hikari, and disappearing into the shadows with her. In an undisclosed location, a cave, Naruto appeared next to Hikari, as they looked into the dark damp cave. "How are the others?" asked the male of the group. "Oh, they're fine. Taiya is trying to find a reason to kill Gar, while Tamari and Kankuro are out looking for Yang," Hikari answered, as the two ventured in. "What about Yujido and B?" Naruto asked. "Oh, they're still in Kumo, but they'll help when they can." "Good, those two were lucky to be bored in Kumo. If not, infiltrating the place would be far harder," Naruto said, as he came across the sound of an argument spewing forth. "For the last time I did not steal your cookie," Gar's monotone voice said, but annoyance could clearly be heard in the mix. "I know you took it, you fucked her. Now where is it, you two-bit motherfucker?" Naruto snickered to himself, as he heard Gar's sigh. "Taiya could be a handful at times." "Taiya, chill, it's just a cookie," Naruto said, as he and Hikari entered the room. "That's a cookie, it's my cookie," Taiya replied hotly. "Is she still pissed off about the hot springs prank?" Naruto asked himself. Unfortunately somebody had been listening. Maybe not. I don't even see why she was made. I mean, she wasn't even in the hot spring when the prank happened, and where the hell did she get the frying pan from? "We were in the middle of a hot spring for Kami's sake," the fox replied. Yes, there was the everlasting question, as to where women got those damn frying pans from. Even the almighty Kyuubi no Kitsune had spent the better part of a century trying to figure it out. Yes, that was one of life's many great mysteries, right next to why women gain freakish strength when in the presence of a pervert. Alright, look, we're heading out to Konoha in a week's time. You can get a cookie there, and I even know a good dango restaurant there," Naruto said, which got the intended result, as Taiya grinned before disappearing with Hikari into the many catacombs in the cave. "Heh, women right, Gar?" Gar simply rolled his eyes at his friend brother, as he pulled out a kunai, and began to sharpen it. "Remind me again why we let her join us." Naruto chuckled at how blunt his friend was with her. "She was an orphan, and she's been through things like us." Both the boys gained a solemn look at this. True, when they first met Taiya they just thought she was a brat that wanted to mess with them, but when they found out she was a street orphan facing the same pain and loneliness as the two Jinchurikis did, they took her in, and made her a part of their family. "So how's Shukaku?" Naruto asked. When Naruto had first met Gar, he found out that Shukaku, the one-tailed raccoon, had been terrorizing his mind, and making it nearly impossible for Gar to sleep. So a little chat with Kyuubi, and some influence from the Omnigan, the tailed beast just sighed, and left his container to sleep. After that episode, Gar could not stop thanking Naruto after everything he did for him. What was better was that the blonde was able to get Gar to follow him, and leave the sand for the time being at least. Gar knew his father would not be pleased, but he didn't care. He was a horrible dad. "He's still grumpy, but he's getting better. Our relationship isn't anything like you and Kyuubi though," Gar replied. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. "So how are you feeling?" Gar's voice was usually only laced with curiosity and concern. "What do you mean?" We're heading back to Konoha, your home village after 8 years. The same very village that treated you like how Olust and Shuriki were treated. Are you gonna lose it? He sounded genuinely concerned, but also a bit hopeful. When Gaara and Naruto met, he wanted to burn Konoha down to the ground. It was one thing when Gaara found out that the assassination attempt against him alongside the story of his mother not loving him turning out false, left a dent in him. But when he found out about Naruto's life, how his father and mother gave their lives for him, and asked he be seen as a hero only for them to squander the legendary shinobi's name. It was sick. The villagers in Sand only stood away for fear that Gaara might lose it, which was understandable since he had no control over Shukaku, and the seal wasn't as strong as Naruto's own. But because of that, Gaara was angry. People just left him alone, whereas in Naruto's condition, he was beaten and scarred. This left a boiling pot deep in his stomach, where Gaara left a personal spot for what the Konoha villagers did to his brother. No, Gaara, I put those feelings aside. The villagers only acted out in fear. It was understandable how they treated me, but not excusable, the blonde replied. You're too forgiving for your own good, replied Gaara while shaking his head. The blonde just grinned before he pushed himself up from the wall he was leaning up against, and made his way out the cave. Get everyone ready, we're heading out once the sun sets, Naruto ordered, as he walked out. Gaara gave a nod, as a response before he left to go tell Taiya and Hakiri. As Naruto walked out, he began to think about Konoha. I wonder if anybody recognizes me. Naruto pondered. I think it'd be better if they don't recognize your kid, Kurama said, his voice in a low growl at Konoha. It's just another stinkhole. I guess you're right, Naruto thought sadly. He may have been bored in Konoha, but the village just wasn't home, not anymore at least. You should practice going into sage mode, that would make you feel better, Kurama added. Yes, you're right. After the talk with Kurama, Naruto made his way up into a tree where he closed his eyes, and let nature energy enter his body. It was a weird feeling really. With Kurama's power, all he felt was rage, raw and powerful rage, but with sage mode, it was calm, serene. Opening his eyes, Naruto sped through hand signs, and slammed his palm onto the ground before a giant toad appeared, and the blonde sat carelessly on his head. Naruto, why did you summon me? Gamabunta roared. He didn't like being called for nothing. Hey Gamabunta, what was my dad like? Naruto asked. The great toad boss just sighed. When Naruto found out his father was the fourth, and he was his personal summon, the blonde often asked him these questions. Honestly, he didn't mind. He always liked Minato, but the boy would be driven insane if he continued to talk about him like this. Naruto, as I've said, and as you probably heard, Minato was a great man, loyal and strong, but why are you asking me? This honestly made the toad boss curious. Naruto usually summoned him in the morning. I'm going back to Konoha, Naruto answered, hearing a hum from Gamabunta Naruto's side. Do you think it's a good idea? The blonde asked. To be honest, Naruto, I don't know. One side of me is torn to burn it down to the ground because of what they did to Minato, but another side is because Konoha is Minato's village, and by destroying it, I would further trample his good name. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Thanks, Gamabunta. The toad boss just grunted before disappearing in approve. Landing gracefully into the forest floor, Naruto began stretching. With the sight, he released Sage Mode and activated his Omnigan. The center Tomo expanded for a moment before 4 lines began protruding out, and ended after touching the first spiraling line. After a version of Susanoo formed behind Naruto, this Susanoo was greatly different from Itachi Uchiha's Susanoo. This one was formed through the use of the Omnigan. Instead of the usual black-colored demonic soldier, this one was pure white, and wasn't a skeleton. Instead, it was an angel. She had long flowing white hair, and wore a long form-fitting white dress that went past her feet. She had 2 long and white wings that surrounded Naruto's sides, protecting him. On one hand she carried a long broadsword, while on the other she carried a shield with the symbol of a raven's claw on it. Pleased with the result, Naruto let the attack die down before walking back to the cave. The next day, Naruto, Hikari, and Gaara stood together in the front of the group. Hikari was in between Naruto and Gaara, and she had changed clothes. She now wore a red kimono-like top while wearing a white sash-like belt that was done in a bow tie on her back. Her hair was the same, except it looked like it was redder. She wore tight form-fitting shorts with knee-length dark purple boots that exposed her toes. On her waist was a pendant that was much like the whirlpool symbol from Naruto's clan, except this one was amber green, and it had a shuriken in the center. Temari, Kankuro, and Taiya were in the back. The 2 girls were talking animatedly while Kankuro just sighed. Being with girls was always a good thing, but being with a foul mouth, and his sister was not. When the group first met Taiya, she was very rude, and didn't trust them, but after a while she warmed up to them, or at least Naruto and Temari. She was still dealing with trust issues with Gaara and Kankuro when she caught the 2 of them peeping on her. To be fair, it was Kankuro who was spying, and Gaara who was trying to stop him. But that wasn't how she saw it when produced a frying pan out of nowhere. When they reached the gates, they were greeted by the sight of Izumo and Kotetsu. Before any of them could say anything, Naruto placed them into an induced sleep, and the 2 continued their walk undeterred. The reason why they were there was that one of Naruto's informants was there for the exams. A ninja from Grass, if he wasn't mistaken. Naruto walked up to the academy, when his school now only a place where bad memories reside. The rest had split off to what they wanted, while Naruto just continued to stare at it, all the while listening intently to the footsteps coming to his side. Sage, the man next to him, said in a whisper. Suzuki, Naruto replied. What do you have for me? Suzuki pulled out a file from his person and handed it to Naruto. Something big is going on, Sage, and I don't know what, but I know it has something to do with the Jinchuriki. Naruto or Sage just nodded his head and disappeared without a sound. Suzuki just sighed before he made his way into the academy. No use making his team wait for him. Naruto's eyes began scanning the area around him. The ninja in the village must be very relaxed because Naruto could only see and sense level chakra reserves from every ninja, even Andu. This was disappointing. Naruto then swung around and looked down onto a man who was literally pissing himself. Behind the man was Gar and Kankuro, while the girls were out shopping or something. This man was a very important man because this man was a civilian council member who was in league with Orochimaru, and Naruto needed the information regarding Orochimaru that instant. Please, I'll tell you anything you want, the man pleaded. Naruto nodded his head as he placed his hand on the man's head. Oh, I know you will. At that moment in time, an unbelievable amount of pain shot through him, and he couldn't even scream thanks to Gar's sand in his mouth. Naruto was concentrating, and it was best not to disturb him. What he was doing was really simple. He was sending quick bursts of chakra into the man's body, and said chakra were swarming his brain, more accurately the part of the brain that retained memory. The chakra began scooping up the required memories, and started sending them to Naruto's brain, where he began filling them and sorting them away. Usually Naruto would use the Rinnegan properties in his eyes to deal with the interrogating, but that would result in the man's death, and because of his profession, that would lead to too much suspicion, so this would have to suffice. When he was finally done, Naruto let go of the man's head where he slumped to the ground. He wasn't dead, just unconscious. He might have slight amnesia, but Naruto placed on him to make him think he was drunk, and was dropped of here by thugs because he insulted them. After the job was done, he and the two males disappeared without a trace. The next day, enough. The Hokage bellowed as he stared at the civilian council, a small amount of killing intent leaking off from him. Sarutobi hears and hated many things, but what he hated the most were bratty civilians going on and on about their precious Uchiha. If it wasn't for the promise I made you, Itachi, Sasuke would be dead already for all the trouble he's caused me, Sarutobi thought into his mind, as he stared into the eyes of every civilian, as they began to choke from the killing intent. Let us begin the discussion about the exam, Sarutobi said, getting nods from the shinobi side, while the civilians were mumbling to themselves. The Sandaime felt the coming of a headache, as the meeting would progress. The hares stood up, and spoke with an air of finality. I decree that Jiraiya is to train the Uchiha, and teach all his, even the famed used by our hero the fourth. The civilians nodded at this, and the shinobi in the room, minus Sarutobi's former teammates, began scowling. Denied. Jiraiya will choose his own apprentice, and the right to that A-rank jutsu is held by none, except for those with Namika's blood. Sarutobi was fuming on the inside. He can expect this behavior from the civilians, but from his former teammates. Oh, how they have fallen. The hares scowled while Hamura remained impassive. Danzo, however, remained an unnerving silent. The old warhawk was lost in thought about the latest reports his root had given him. He had been so adamant about that one thing that continued to be squandered in the village, and after he disappeared, Danzo had been searching for him non-stop, but it seems luck was on his side. If that boy is here, then making him into a weapon would be easy, he thought. Little did he know he was going to get a surprise. In the Konoha market district, Kiba, Hinata, and Shino were walking through the market. They had just finished training, and were now looking for food when Hinata caught sight of a peculiar sight. In an old ramen stand there was a man wearing a white coat with a kanji for sage on his back, while scarfing down on the famed noodles in Fire Country, and by the looks of the 20 bowls stacked next to him, he ate a lot of it. Hinata wanted to sweat, but she was too shy to do that, and instead just flinched and walked away, but Shino and Kiba looked at the guy oddly, having never seen someone like that before, and were sure of something to see. While that was happening, Naruto was busy scarfing down on the beautiful mistress known as ramen. However Kami, his wife-to-be, would always be glorious, this food was the greatest of all. Ayam and Tucci stood slack-jawed at his impressive eating habit. They had only seen one other person eat that much. Before they could say anything, the headed figure that was sitting on their counter eating ramen disappeared, leaving behind a hefty sum of ryo on the table. Ayam's jaw dropped to the ground at the sight of the amount of money. Look at the amount of clothes I can buy with that, she thought. Tucci, however, was having none of it, and quickly scooped up the money before she could even touch them. Back with Naruto. Nah. Would you take me away from what I was eating? Naruto yelled furiously that his ramen time was cut down. Naruto turned his head to see another member of his little group. This member was Yang. Her hair was a frilly blonde, and she wore a dark brown leather jacket with a white blouse underneath, and a skirt that ended at her mid-calf from the front, while in the back it continued to just above her knees. On her waist was a katana, and on her back was a sword christened the Dragon Blade, but there wasn't anything special about it, except for a hilt it had a dragon's head. Naruto, don't you know it's not healthy to just eat ramen, right? She asked with a stern face, which was strange seeing it on a girl at least 1 or 2 years younger than Naruto. "No, Yang, where'd you been? Tamari and Kankuro have been looking everywhere for you. Though I spotted some slavers, and thought I should pay them a visit," she said with a wicked smile, making Naruto shiver. The blonde bowed his head in respect to the slavers, though he hated slavery with a vengeance, knowing that those poor souls who had to face Yang's wrath would be far worse from anything he would do. "Alright, let's go," the blonde said, as he began dashing off across the rooftops. It didn't take long until they reached the rest of the group. Taiya and Tamari were talking animatedly, and by seeing them, Yang quickly made her way to them. Takari was talking with Gar, while Kankuro was looking into a girl's window using high-powered binoculars. Naruto smirked seeing the male Sand sibling, Kankuro. "What poor girl are you spying on now?" "Some blonde girl, Yamanaka I believe," Kankuro said with a perverted grin. "Damn, if she had paid more attention to her training, maybe she might have spotted you already," Naruto said with a grin. "Makes my life easier," Kankuro said with a perverted chuckle, only to get bonked on the head with a frying pan by Taiya Irobaka. Naruto could barely keep his laughing in at his friend's misfortune, but soon enough he had to get serious. The exams were happening soon, and if his sources were right, Orochimaru would be there to get his precious Uchiha, and when that happens, he'd have to stop him, and maybe work on the Uchiha's common sense a bit. But that would be a secondary objective. "Alright guys, let's go, watch each other's backs," Naruto stated, and the group nodded their heads before disappearing. With Naruto, the blonde was racing through the woods at high speed, and landed next to a camp in the woods. Very devious Sand and Sound had placed camps all around the Leaf Village, and all of them were concealed in underground bunkers or caves, and even if any patrols spotted them, there were users waiting to pounce on them, and erase their memories. "Naruto, be careful, may not affect you, but they will still dampen your abilities," the fox warned, getting a nod from the young sage. Closing his eyes, Naruto activated his chakra signatures of everyone in his line of sight. 1 2 3 25 This should be easy, thought the blonde, as he dropped onto the ground. He landed with a crouch, barely making any noise before speeding forward. His grace and movements were simply a breeze in the air. Silent, not a single sound was made. He stopped behind a ninja, and began running through hand signs before whispering heavenly grasp, and just like that Naruto's eyes sent a speck of chakra into the man's body, and began disrupting the flow before it reached the center of its well, and burned it all out. The ninja died without even knowing how. Naruto smiled as he walked off and met another ninja, and he didn't need to die. In this situation they were victims, Gar would agree. He walked forward and tapped his shoulder, making the guard spin around and stare into his eyes. Before he was knocked out by a single whispered Tsukiyomi, the man was dragged into Naruto's world where he was knocked out. Before he could touch the ground, the blonde grabbed him and pulled him away. He continued on his crouch walk and came across about 10 different men standing outside the entrance to the bunker surrounding a fire. All sound except for 2 who are Sand, Naruto thought, as he began analyzing the situation. He would go the sneaky way, but going all out and putting the fear of God into Orochimaru was too tempting, and technically Naruto was a god, just got to get hitched first. Naruto smiled as he exposed himself to the ninjas. All of them began scattering the moment he stepped out. A few tried to run away and call for help, but he stopped them using a mud barrier. Not that it mattered, since everybody else was dealing with the other camps. "Well, this is going to be fun. Well, for me anyways," Naruto said nonchalantly, as he pulled out a katana from seemingly nowhere, a hem seals a hem, and took up a stance. The group of Sound ninjas started to gain scowls, and pulled out their kunai, overconfidence written on their stances. However, the Sand nin seemed to be hesitant. It seemed they knew when they were outmatched. Naruto smirked. 3 Sound nins jumped forward trying to get a hit on the cloaked figure that stood before them, but ultimately hit nothing but a log before the same figure dropped from behind them, and in one smooth motion bisected 2, while the third got nicked in the arm. That leaves 7 with 1 that was wounded. Naruto took up a ready stance, as another Sound nin jumped forward. Naruto's katana met the nin kunai in a clash of sparks, before he took up a stance reminiscent to that of Jayukin, only it involved a blade, and not his hands. 100 Gates of Hell. Naruto yelled out, as his hands moved in a blur. The ninja couldn't even see where his blade was hitting, except for the familiar sound of metal hitting flesh. When the strikes ended, Naruto placed his katana into his sheath that was revealed to be on his waist, leaving the blade only inches out with his thumb, before he slammed the blade completely in, and made a thump noise. As if on cue, the Sound nin that was attacked started to gain slash marks on his clothes and body before fire burst out of the wounds, incinerating the man before he could even scream. The surviving ninjas all began sweating at this sight. Their opponent was very strong, and they knew they wouldn't survive, but if they were to die, they would die with honor. The Sound nin from before who got nicked in the arm jumped forward, and in a downward slash, tried to impale Naruto's head, only for him to sidestep it, and push the hilt of his blade into the ninja's gut, before pulling out his own kunai, and ramming it through the poor pawn's neck, and ripping it out. Before the lifeless corpse touched the body, Naruto jumped forward, and met another Sound nin with a deadly dance of blades, before Naruto jumped away from him, and attacked a surprise nin, slicing his head in half before returning, and attacking his previous opponent. 5. The Sound nin sent a plea to his allies, and altogether the ninjas jumped forward. Naruto had to be careful, he couldn't risk harming the sand nin. So he pulled back, and rushed through hand signs wind release. Great breakthrough. The wall of pressurized air slammed into the sand, launching them far away from the fight, and leaving the three sound nin for Naruto. The sage dashed forward, and rammed his blade into one of the sound nin's gut, before he sliced his way through his dead corpse, and towards the others. The two ninjas regained their composure, and met the blade with their kunai, only for Naruto to let go of it, and take out his own kunai. He rammed it into the closest ninja before kicking the corpse into the other, making him lose balance, which is a very fatal thing. Naruto rushed through hand signs, as the center tomo of his eyes began expanding into a saw blade, and out came a white flame of Amaterasu, that burned away the ninja before he could even scream. With the sound nin done, Naruto dashed off to go deal with the sand nin. With Yang and Tei. "Hey, who are you, Chu?" A sound nin yelled, as he was impaled by Yang's blade. Pathetic, she spat before twirling, and impaling another nin. Tei was off on a tree using her flute to make the sound of ninjas fighting each other. The looks on their faces when they were being attacked by their own comrades were priceless. The Redeed snorted happily, as her kill count began to rise. The blonde girl saw this, and smiled. Tei was the only one who could match her battle-crazed mind. "Hey Blondie, I spotted a hot tie not far from you," Tei yelled at her. True to her word, a big muscle-toned man appeared wielding a large blade, and was staring at Yang with what appeared to be lust, but that was what all Yang saw on men's faces. She felt a bile rise in her throat, as a look of disgust made it to her face. She turned to Tei, and cried out her thanks. The Redeed acknowledged her with a nod before the blonde turned back to her opponent. He was readying himself in a stance. This one was a brute, as far as Yang could tell. He would be a worthy opponent. She dropped down into her stance, and the two dashed forward, and met with a resounding clang, eliciting sparks to fly, as they stared into each other's eyes. It stayed that way for a while, before the two disengaged, and began circling each other. A brief moment of praise flashes through the man's eyes. This young lady's figure betrays her strength. Not many could hold up against him in a duel of power, and this little girl seemed to be the first to be evenly matched with him. Just by that, he knew she would be a hard person to kill. He dashed forward while she remained completely still till at the last second, she sheathed her katana, and pulled out her dragon blade, where the two blades met with sparks. The man smirked. "Do you really think that by just changing the sword you'll win?" The man grunted, overconfidence lacing his voice. Yang all but smirked. He wouldn't be a worthy opponent. She sent a wave of her chakra into the blade, and the eyes of the dragon had glowed before fire shot out, and engulfed the blade. The man could feel the intense heat slowly burning his skin, and he watched with horror, as the metal of his blade began to melt. Yang smirked, as she rammed her shoulder into the man's gut, and stood victorious above him. The man could only look in fear, as she placed the tip of her blade above his family jewels, before an evil smile took residence on her face. "Please, no," he begged, but it only seemed to encourage her further, as she let the blade fall. With the Sand siblings, mass burial. Gar intoned, as his sand engulfed a group of sound ninjas before crushing them into tiny little pieces. In that very moment, the two males felt a shiver run up their spines, making them open for three sound ninjas, and a sand nin to exploit, but Tamari sent a wave of wind that sent them back into the ground, knocking them out. "What's wrong?" Tamari asked, her brother's worry evident in her eyes. "I think Yang has found a worthy opponent," Gar intoned, "but if you listen closely you'll find pity there." Kinkuro only shivered in response. Back with Naruto. Sound release. Blisters. A wave of sound began ringing through the walls of the bunker. "Did you really think this would affect me?" Naruto asked. In a way it was affecting him, but the blisters that were being formed were quickly being healed before blood could burst from them. "You owe me something for this," Kurama said, as he began working in overdrive. "Yeah, I'll go imagine up a vixen for you or something." The blonde sage pulled out his katana from his waist, and raced forward, driving the blade into the man's heart before jumping away, and slashing against his enemies. Naruto was skilled, and he wasn't sadistic. Something the sound nins don't have. Some may say being sadistic helps you be a better ninja, but that's only true in a small way. It'd make you more deadly, but the amount of mistakes you'll make just to quell your bloodlust would end only in your death. Naruto ducked underneath the kunai before lashing out with his shuriken, and embedding an enemy into a wall. Before the sound nin could react, he was staring at white soulless eyes, as the center tomo began expanding, and forming a saw blade right before he felt his soul being ripped apart, and taken into Naruto's own. "So Orochimaru knew I'd be coming, eh?" Naruto mused. Through the memories of the cannon fodder he ripped apart, Naruto found out that the snake knew that he was being hunted down, but thought nothing of it, and instead believed that his men could deal with it before the invasion, but it seems he was dead wrong. The pedophile always was overconfident in his abilities. Naruto continued to walk down the hallways, swiping the blood of his blade before sheathing it again. He stopped himself when he reached a door, big red double doors. How subtle, he thought before he placed his finger on the door, and using the motion of a simple love tap, the door burst open, and collided into the ground with a smash, sending dust and pieces of concrete everywhere. "So the great and powerful sage has paid me a visit." The deranged cackled, as the blonde stood in his position. The blonde could feel the chakra Orochimaru was pulsing, thinking, as if such a small and insignificant power could match up to his. You know about something I want, Naruto intoned. Oh, and what might I ask, is that? The pale man was smiling evilly, a certain gleam in his eyes when he saw the eyes that were shining in the man's eye sockets. There had been many tales that came from this so-called sage, most of which were about his eyes, so powerful, if Orochimaru were to come into possession of such eyes, immortality would be an arm's reach away. The location, and members of the criminal organization Akatsuki the Sage replied before shimmering out of existence, and reappearing behind his blade out, and against his neck. I'm asking nicely here, you don't want to see me ask any other way. His voice was cold and dead, and he had to suppress a shudder, as the cold metal of his weapon pricked his skin letting blood flow. Acting quickly, Orochimaru performed a seamless substitution, and pulled out his blade, the Kusanagi, and prepared himself for a battle. Sigh, and here I thought you were supposed to be smart. Naruto dashed forward using only a tenth of his normal speed, and met up with Orochimaru with a sideward slash that was intercepted by the Kusanagi. The snake pushed away from his adversary before performing hand seal's many hidden shadow snake hands. A plethora of snakes burst from his sleeves, and slithered their way to the sage only for half their number to vanish in a puff of smoke. What? The snake man was shocked at this. Is this the power of his eyes? Meanwhile Naruto just smirked. The technique he used made it, so he summoned snakes to do his bidding, but there was a catch unlike a usual summoning. These are directly attached to the summoner, and use his chakra to be able to appear, which is why they appear from his hands. By using his ability, and cutting off the chakra from reaching the snakes, these snakes will then disappear because of the severed connection, but Naruto was only capable of doing a handful, but still, it made work easier for him. Pushing wind chakra into a pair of shuriken, he whispered vacuum blades, sending the shuriken out, and transforming them into widespread lethal fan blades that cut down the snakes, before ultimately stopping by a swipe from Kusanagi. Naruto and Orochimaru kept a stare down going on. Wind release. Great breakthrough. A wall of pressurized air slammed into Naruto, but the sage pumped chakra into his legs, gluing him into position. My turn. Fire release. Fire Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. A volley of flames were sent to Orochimaru, and he was forced to be on guard to dodge all of them. But his eyes widened when nearly half of the flames he dodged disappeared to reveal shrunken in them. He was lucky to have dodged half of them, but a good number of shuriken embedded itself into his arms. Yield. The sage yelled. Never. Orochimaru yelled defiantly, as he raced through a number of hand seals before slamming his palm onto the ground. Out from underneath it came a giant purple snake. Manda. Naruto smiled. He just signed his own death warrant. Manda killed him. Orochimaru commanded, but grew shocked, as the giant snake just stared at his opponent, and then bowed to him. What? Millard, the snake said, his head still low. This on its own made Orochimaru fear the man that stood before him even more. Manda was known for his extreme pride, and for him to bow his head down to anyone would prove his strength. Even Orochimaru had problems when dealing with him. Hello Manda, can you help me deal with Orochimaru? Naruto asked the snake. He was however inwardly laughing at the amount of sweat that was rolling off of Orochimaru's forehead. Yes, Millard. Without another word, Manda threw his head upwards, launching the into the air before he crushed his summoner in a belly flop. After Manda disappeared in a puff of smoke, Naruto had to hold his sides at the sight of the squashed S-rank criminal before him. Oh, this is too good. Naruto made his way down onto the small crater of Orochimaru's defeat, and looked into his eyes. He said nothing, as he stared into the eyes of the sage, as the center Tomo expanded, and took the form of a saw blade. Before succumbing to darkness, Naruto grimaced. There was practically no real information inside Orochimaru's head, other than how to be a pedophile, and escape the prying eyes of the Anbu, and since Naruto already knew the latter, and didn't want to know the other, he was given nothing of real importance. He turned away, and began walking only to be stopped by a rustling of gravel and dirt. Out from the shadows came his little group, and, as well, as Hikari, who tossed a file to Naruto. I infiltrated the Hokage's office, and found nothing we didn't already know, but I checked up on the civilian homes, and came out with several of them having papers of recruiting assassins to hunt you down. If you look through the papers, you'll find the names of the 5 past assassins that we killed chasing you this month, she reported. Naruto hummed to himself. So that's where they came from, he mused before flipping through the papers, and frowned when he read some of the names. The Blood Red Huntress. That name piqued Naruto's interest, as he had never heard that name, an assassin he has no information of. That was dangerous. Naruto gave a curt nod before all of them disappeared out of sight. The very next day, the Hokage sat peacefully on his desk, or perhaps none too little. He looked around his room, and his gaze dropped onto Homura and Koharu, his former teammates, and bane of his existence. Off to his side was Danzo, who, since they had been friends for quite a while, could tell he was inwardly seething. As to why, he knows not of why, but he knows anything that Danzo made either involved his route, which he knew was still operational, or the livelihood of Konoha. Both weren't really ideal. Explain to me again why you are here. Sarutobi groaned out, and he would have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile flash on Danzo's face at his expense. Kaharu huffed before speaking, as if her position were even greater than the Hokage the Uchiha needs to get stronger. He is weak, Haddock's teachings is not enough. I suggest we place him under the teaching of an Anbu operative. Sarutobi bristled at that. The Anbu had better things to do than to deal with the arrogant Uchiha. If he sicked Yugao on the Uchiha, he wouldn't even last a day, let alone an hour. No, the idea would probably end in the civilian section, asking for Yugao's head for doing what they asked of her. He will not condemn one of his own to deal with a civilian. No, that would be a fate far too cruel from hell. No, Kaharu, the Anbu have more pressing matters to tend to than to teach the Uchiha. The Sandaime said with a tired sigh, slightly irritated that they seemed to be forgetting who was the leader of the village. The old woman's face scrunched up in anger before she began doing the passive-aggressive political way of bitching. Denzo however paid no heed to the woman or his former friend, as his mind began to work overdrive. His root had seen the fight Naruto, and his band of, what he can only assume, mercenaries beat down a massive contingent of sound and sand in yesterday, and he was seething on how his root failed to have come anywhere near such a threat to Konoha, and the fact that the Jinchuriki to have such power, he would be unrivaled. He had to suppress a chuckle that was escaping his lips, as he feigned himself being interested in the conversation, which was again talking about the arrogant Uchiha. There are few things he would agree with Sarutobi, but this was a matter that the two acknowledged in their younger years. The Sharingan was a cheater's way of becoming strong. But he smiled briefly, as he rubbed his hand absent-mindedly on his bandaged arm. But shinobi don't play fair after all. With Naruto, the blonde sage was currently passing off the remaining amount of time he had in Konoha, simply walking around catching the sights. He could briefly recall faces of people he once considered friends when he passed by their homes. Sakura, the banshee of a crush he had, though she wasn't that pretty, she was the only one who would even acknowledge his presence, making him crave simply for the attention. Sasuke, the theme who was arrogant and cocky, but even through it the two had a rivalry of power and brotherhood, as camaraderie was established even before the academy days, and their meeting in the circumstances of his family's death. Something that seemed to shatter Naruto, as he could understand Sasuke's feelings to an extent, as he never really grew up with a family, but if he were to lose Gaara or Chihaya or anybody in his group, whom have become family to him, he'd be devastated. No, he'd go batshit insane trying to hunt down the person who did it. Naruto smiled inwardly, as he saw a bunch of kids playing in front of the academy ground, and a lone swing in front of it, where he would spend his days being excommunicated from everyone else. Feeling a brief bout of nostalgia, Naruto sat down on the swing, as he used to before looking at the school longingly. I wonder how Iruka-sensei is. Naruto mused. Even though Naruto was young at the time, he could see it in his teacher's eyes, the only eyes that have ever really accepted him. There wasn't anger and disdain in those eyes, instead worry and care that only an older brother would hold. But his thoughts were cut short when he felt something press on his back. He lifted his head slightly to see Hikari leaning against him, her arms around his waist, and her face nuzzled in the crook of his neck. Bad memories? She asked, her voice soft and soothing. Naruto answered in an even tone, refusing to seem weak in the eyes of, he considered, his charge. Hikari was young when he met her, one of the first he accepted into this little group. It was a year after he left Konoha. He found her when visiting a village, and the two played for a while, but later he father ushered her back home. Naruto didn't know at the time, but when she arrived she was greeted by another boy whom she was supposed to marry. This boy was arrogant, cocky, and rude, a huge contrast to the company she had moments ago. That night she stood crying at having to marry a boy she didn't want to marry, catching the attention of Naruto, who had stopped by to return her a pendant she dropped when she left the area they were playing at. She told him what happened, and Naruto went all out on her parents. That night he learned a lot of secrets about her clan, secrets he refused to tell Hikari, and even to believe them true, but because of those secrets he took Hikari in, even though only being a year older than her, and left the clan house a smoldering mess to quell his anger. The young redhead had always been a little sister to Naruto, and after he told her about the fox, she remained completely impassive about it, stating that if it was sealed in Naruto, that would mean Naruto was the jailer, and not the jailed. The blonde smiled at that memory. Hikari noticed it raised her eyebrows, but didn't press. You know we could burn Konoha down to the ground, Hikari suggested, but there was no humor in her voice. Naruto sighed at that point. Nearly everybody in their group wanted Konoha a piece of ash, all of which connected to Naruto. They would often say that his feelings were their feelings, and what they did to him was what they did to all of them, and all agreed to burn the village. But the blonde sage could do no such thing, too many innocent, Naruto thought. That's not gonna happen, Naruto said, as he listened intently to the sounds of wolves howling into the night, and crickets chirping. Hikari nodded her head against his back, but kept close to him. She would gladly admit it, alongside the other females, that Naruto was literally a personal heater for all of them. The amount of body warmth he produced was staggering, and it helped during the chilly seasons. Plus the fact that he honestly didn't mind being hugged by any of them made things far more easier. Come on, it's getting late, we should get home, Naruto said, as he raised himself off his swing, but had to suppress a chuckle when Hikari simply clung to him tighter, forcing him to give her a piggyback. He was about to say something when he felt a tingling feeling going down on him. It was the same tingling feeling when he was attacked by a Jinjutsu, he thought with wide eyes before turning, and gently sliding a Jinjutsu induced, sleeping Hikari off his back, and pulled out the kunai. As he scanned the tree area, his ocular abilities rendered useless for the moment. Ninjutsu was an art Naruto thoroughly hated. Not just because it was impossible for him to set up, without his eyes of course, but when one was casted on him he could barely see using his eyes. Simply because it was the art of placing a person in an illusion by practically putting him in a veil of chakra that would affect the area around him. Normally it would mean nothing because of the Kyuubi and his eyes, but a particularly strong, which was one that was usually put on him, would take a while to break out of, but he wouldn't still be affected, because his eyes are capable of bypassing entirely. But the only problem is the chakra veil surrounding which practical blinds him from seeing any other chakra source outside said veil, making his ocular abilities impossible since he was incapable of seeing the flow of chakra in his opponent to control it. Chakra is like a raging fire, it cannot be tamed, and when it is very unpredictable and difficult. Because of this, Naruto needed to see the chakra in order to perfectly control it, to either stop the flow completely, which uses an awful lot of concentration mind you, or simply use the chakra against his opponent. But thanks to the chakra veil, Naruto has to resort to using his regular eyes, a pair of cerulean eyes he hadn't used in a long time, again. So without further hesitation Naruto deactivated his eyes, and continued to scan. But he was literally pissed when he felt another being placed on him seriously. He seethed, as he thought of the thrashing he was about to bestow on his enemy. Out of the trees 4 men dressed strangely, wearing plain white masks appeared, and ripped out their ninjatos off their backs. So you escaped the A. Rather quickly I would say, one of the ninjas said. Naruto knew these people, root operatives, victims under the command of Danzo, so he was hesitant in fighting them, but knew their minds were too far gone to be saved. Without further ado Naruto jumped forward, and kunai clashed against Ninjato, as the two dueled only to have it interrupted when another raced forward to grab him. Reacting quickly Naruto dropped to the ground, and raced through hand signs before calling out one of the many, non-ocular techniques he had. Wind release. Wind Dragon Jutsu. The dragon made of pure air sailed, and impacted into the root ninja's body, before Naruto unleashed his full speed, and rocketed away from his opponent in a sonic boom. Caught surprised by the move, the root operative had to fight down the urge to cup his bleeding ears from the sound that accompanied their adversary's impressive speed. Before anyone noticed, a faint afterimage of pure blonde passed by the group before it disappeared alongside 2 of their allies. What the? He couldn't finish his sentence, as the one who had been hit with the wind dragon disappeared as well. The root operative made a single step back out of fear, before an image shimmered into existence before him, white soulless eyes staring into him, with the center Tomo, taking the shape of 3 interconnected sides, spinning furiously at him. Penance stare was the last thing he heard before out of the eyes, only one word could explain it, hell appeared. Bright glowing flames burst from his eyes, and burned into his own. Images of people burning, and suffering, a world of fire, and demons plaguing his thoughts. He was forever trapped in this world, as he dropped dead on the ground. His eyes burned into stone. Naruto cupped his eyes in his hands. That technique exhausted him mentally, as he needed to think up of the world he wanted to forever entrap the man who ruined a peaceful moment in. So he used what he would describe as hell, and simply just left him there for the rest of his life. The blonde turned around, and picked up his charge, and walked away, not caring about the root body that was strewn on the ground or his comrades that were laid out in the area, in various compromising positions and areas. He was pretty sure he dropped one of them in the women's changing room at the hot springs. That one was probably gonna have a fun time. Sigh, and here I thought Konoha would get better. He muttered before he disappeared with a sonic boom, and reappeared in front of a hotel. He entered it, and gave a nod to the receptionist who nodded back before discreetly doing hand seals underneath the desk, activating privacy seals. Naruto would very proudly admit of his spy network, and loyal soldiers under his commands. However, it was harder to get some into Konoha, considering some of the people's grudge against him, but he was capable of sneaking in some of his more well-trained soldiers who later took up jobs, and became part of the civilian population. The hotel housed one of his many operatives stationed in Konoha. After the hotel was perfectly secured, Naruto entered a single room at the top of the hotel which held the entire group, minus him, and Hikari of course. What happened? Tamari asked in worry, as she gently lifted Hikari off Naruto's back. Some of Danzo's fruit attacked us just now, Naruto grunted out, as he began nursing a rather sizable cut on his arms. One of the root operatives got a lucky hit when he was dragging them away. Let me see that, Yang said softly, as she performed a medical on Naruto's arm. It wouldn't really matter because of Kyuubi, but the fox would sometimes leave wounds, as they are reasoning that it was experience for pain tolerance, which actually did make sense. Ever since Kurama stopped healing some of the nastier wounds, Naruto learned to grow a pain tolerance, and could probably survive at least a half hour of interrogation against a Biki Marino, and that's saying something. It's not that bad really, Naruto tried to reassure her when he saw the worried look on her face. Not that bad, they were inches from hitting an artery. she retorted heatedly, as green chakra began forming on her palms. The blonde resigned himself to his fate, as he waited for the to finish. You know we should probably deal with Danzo, and his root Gar suggested if anything it'll make things easier for us in the future, with our plans of stopping the Akatsuki. Temari added. Naruto just sighed. In truth he had planned on dealing with Root, but not so soon. He had planned on using Danzo to find Tobi, the alleged Madara, as his wife Kami told him. Oh yes, every once and a while Kami would come down and talk to Naruto, though she'd wear the skimpiest of outfits to tease Naruto and talk about stuff with him. But Naruto had plenty of other ways to find out about Tobi, but he couldn't ask his wife about it, her reasoning being if you are to be a god, you need to act like one, and do things on your own. The blonde nodded his head in understanding. His idea to use Danzo was now useless, as Danzo now will probably know he is the alleged sage the ninja god. The traitorous man would probably be able to piece everything together somehow. There were just too many variables to leave the man alive. Nodding his head, Naruto turned to Gar and Kankura. You guys get prepared, most likely we'd be in for a fight for our lives. It won't be like the sand and sound. These guys are trained to deal with guys like us. Nodding their head, the two brothers left to prepare, while Naruto turned to the females. They all exchanged knowing looks before looking at Naruto, fire burning in their eyes. To his credit he didn't flinch. We're going with you. Their girls started in one, except Hikari who was still asleep. No, his voice boomed, making sure they understood the gravity of the situation. You girls may have proven competent against the sand and sound troops, but they were mere cannon fodder. These are trained assassins that put even the Hokage's stem in shame. You are inexperienced and ill-prepared. Naruto looked at Taiya. You may be skilled in, but in your physical area you are merely genin material, making you useless for the close quarters fighting. The Redeed visibly cringed when Naruto blue eyes that once held warmth were not ice-cold, soulless. Naruto turned to Temari. You are no different. While your abilities with wind are among commendable levels, you are useless without your fan. And again in close quarter fighting, the blonde lowered her head, not wanting to meet his gaze. Naruto looked to Yang. You are the only one of them who I can safely say that can last at least take on 2 root members alone. This got Yang smiling. But you are limited to your blades. All of your techniques are close quarters, making the polar opposite of the other two, which if you were balanced would be alright, but you're not, and I doubt Root would be honorable and fight with only blades. Yang gained a downcast expression, and when his gaze landed on Hikari, his eyes softened. I don't need to explain Hikari. She's not physically strong, and only knows a few, most of those few being medical. She is not capable of defending herself, let alone attacking a root ninja. After stating each of their faults, Naruto started casting his gaze to each one, softening, as he continued down. Each of you are strong in your own right, but not strong enough. With that, Naruto left through the door, also going to get prepared, leaving the women to think his words through. In a secluded location, several hours after the talk, Naruto sat atop a tree trunk and stared at the underground base that laid ahead. He had changed his clothes drastically. No longer did he wear the flak jacket, but instead he wore a chest plate, complete steel, and able to withstand even the strongest blade. Under that he wore a black shirt with streaks of red on the sleeves. He wore metal greaves and arm bracers alongside metal boots and shin guards. He now wore a mask. This mask was white, and his eye holes, instead of being circular, were instead rectangular with red streaks going down the eye holes, as if it was crying bloody tears. The eye holes held nothing but darkness in them, pitch black, except for the furiously spinning eyes of Naruto's. By his side was Gar, dressed in a similar armored chest plate, but lacking the rest. He wore red steel-toed sandals with red pants and shirt. His gourd was still the same, except now there were several longer than average kunai strapped around the center of it. Kankura was also no longer wearing his catsuit. Instead he wore a white flak jacket with the kanji for Puppet Master on his back, and a pair of dark brown pants and shirt. On his head he wore a headband, but instead of the symbol for Suna, it had the kanji of death. On his back was his trust puppet, while around his waist were smaller puppets, dolls to be exact. These were his trump card. Behind them were a row of ninjas. Each dressed the same, all of them wearing white flak jackets with a pair of dark black pants, and shirts with black sandals, and the headband on their foreheads with the kanji for light. These were Naruto's troops, the carriers of his will, of the god's will. To ensure peace in the land of Chaos, that is their goal, that is Naruto's goal, that is the goal of the village hidden in the light. Without further ado, he and his team of sleepers jumped off and prepared for a fight. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.